Okay, so this is where we left off. Chapter 5, different types of conformity. So, compliance is the mildest form of conformity. Those are actions that, you try to gain some sort of reward and avoid a punishment, right? So, that's pretty mild because you're just trying to go along to get along, basically. Identification is the level of conformity where you basically try to maintain relationships with a person or group. So, you in some way, either physically, emotionally, verbally identify with a particular group. And then internalization is the strongest type of conformity. It's when you adopt the beliefs or actions of a group and make them your own beliefs, right? So, we were talking about the media as a socializer of kind of like beauty image ideals, right? Through that Jane Kilborn clip. Then compliance would be basically seeing an advertisement and thinking, right? Like, I guess I should, wear makeup when I'm in public settings because that's what's expected, right? Identification is when you actually start like saying like, oh, this is your particular brand or this is your particular style that you identify with or something like that, where you're definitely going along with the kind of expectations of the culture, but you're not, they're kind of still externalized to you. And then internalization would be when you basically believe that you should look like the models on TV or the advertisements or something like that because you've literally absorbed what the culture's told you about your body and you physically inside of your own body don't like it compared to what the culture says it should be, right? That's internalization. So that's like the deepest form of that conformity. So, and another example could be like if you were in the car with some of your friends and they turn on the radio and there's a band playing that you don't really like, but all your friends are singing along, right? And they ask you if you like the song, and so you say, sure, it's good, even though you don't like it. That would be compliance, right? You're basically like, sure, I like that song, even though you don't like that song, because you just don't want them to exclude you because clearly they all like it because they're all singing, right? Let's say, continuing with that idea, you go with your friend to the mall and you buy a t shirt from the band that they were listening to in the car that you didn't even like, right? Um, so the fact that you have the shirt means you're exhibiting identification because you want to fit in and be closer to your group of friends by wearing the band t-shirt of the band that you don't even like, right? And then internalization would be like, let's say weeks later, you're in your own car, you turn on the radio, and you start singing along to that song that you didn't like, and you realize now you do like that song, right? And that's internalization. Basically, the group's values and norms have now become your values and norms. So that's kind of a benign example, but that it kind of illustrates the different levels of conformity. Teamwork, right? This is an important facet of being social animals, right? That a group can almost always outperform an individual, but it rarely performs as well as it could in theory, right? We were talking about like the different levels of this, the dyads, the triads, the things of the stability within groups, right? Once a group becomes pretty large, um, it stops to be as efficient because there's a lot more social loafing that's going to go on the more that there's people within a group. So for example, I'm sure if you've ever had a group project and you've had, four or more people in that group, someone doesn't do their fair share. Someone kind of sits out, right? And that's how social loafing works. Like this picture I have down here. Group project, they got this, right? The kind of idea, the more people you put in that group, the less responsible each individual feels for the work of that group, right? So that's kind of a likelihood that can happen. So, also the more people that are involved, it also becomes harder to figure out what person did what, right? Like let's say you have five people sitting together and you're trying to determine like what was your individual effort. It's a lot harder the more people are added to that group. Plus, it's hard to say like, oh, well, it was so and so that did specifically this, because you kind of all were working on it, right? And as a result, motivation can suffer from that. Um, so really, people that are group leaders can increase efficiency by recognizing the individual effort or by increasing members' social identity, right? So I think the best effective way, like when you're doing a group project in school, which you're probably going to be tortured with like a million times before you graduate, is the best key in the very beginning, establish who does what, right? Okay, you're going to work on this part. You're going to work on that part. I'm going to work on this part. The end. That way, each person feels responsible for their individual part. And then somebody, usually if you have like a big ass group, can put it together, and that can be their role of just putting the paper together, doing the citations, doing all that kind of crap. That's a great way to go about that, so that you're able to effectively work together, but you're really individually working together towards the same goal. Alrighty. So different qualities of leadership. First off, we have to define what power, authority, and style are. So power is the ability to control the actions of others. And there's different kinds of power. Coercive power is the power that's backed up by the threat of force, like do this or I will hit you, shoot you, hurt you, whatever. And then there's influential power, which is supported by persuasion, where someone convinces you to do what they want, because they're coercive, or I mean, because they're influential, right? They have a way to sway your perceptions. So Weber identifies three types of authority found in social organizations. So first is traditional authority. Traditional authority is based in customs, birthrights, or divine rights. It's usually associated with monarchies and dynasties. So, like I said, an example of a traditional authority is a king or a queen or some other monarch, right? Someone who's born into a role of leadership. That makes them traditional. So, let's see. Then there's the legal rational. Those are authority members that it's based in law, rules, and procedure. So, for example, in our culture, a police officer has legal rational authority, right? Like they're able to walk around with a gun and, especially with this whole Philando Castile thing, like for lack of a better term, shoot people at will, because they're given a authority based in rules, procedures, and supposedly the law. Charismatic authority is the authority based in the perception of remarkable personal qualities in a leader. So it's weird. Like a lot of the examples that I always see of charismatic authority, they'll say like Hitler, look at him, he convinced so many people, blah, blah, blah. But that's not really, Hitler's a terrible example of charismatic authority. Like, was he boisterous? Did he like yell a lot in his speeches? For sure. But was he charismatic? Not so much. Like, do you want to follow him? No, because no, right? Obviously not. So there are a lot of people that are charismatic leaders throughout time, that most of us know pretty well, like Gandhi, right? Mahatma Gandhi. He would be a charismatic leader. So meaning, he had remarkable personal qualities. These kind of people that they have the values and the qualities that you want in your own life, right? So, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, right? People like that, they basically are so morally uprighteous and have the correct value system that we should have, like peace, love, nonviolence, caring about others, all of those kind of things, that they are able to sway people to their cause or to follow them and, be led by them, because you want to follow someone that you consider to be a good person. All right, so some more of those. There's another term, also another kind of leadership called instrumental, and then there's what's called expressive, right? So an instrumental leadership, that's task or goal oriented. So typically instrumental leaders are less concerned with people's feelings than they are with getting the job done, right? And an expressive leader is someone who's concerned with maintaining emotional and relational harmony within a group, because this is going to lead to positive work environment and improved productivity. So, when someone's happy at their job, they do more. They actually work harder. When you hate your job, you just BS it, right? So there is a lot to be said about expressive leadership. So expressive leaders demonstrate an interest in each person, like in each one of their individual employees' emotions as well as their achievements. right? So typically, though, when it comes to leadership styles, we tend to view these through the lens of gender because we expect women to be more expressive because, the kind of gender role expectations that women are supposed to be emotional and caring and supportive and all this crap. And then we expect men to be instrumental leaders because men are expected to be less emotional, less expressive, more focused on getting things done and task oriented and all this kind of crap. So the really interesting part is that people are really often upset or surprised when those expectations aren't met on either side of that, right? So like if a woman is an instrumental leader, like if she's like, okay, she's not worried about how your kid's doing or trying to chit chat you and care about your emotions, but she's like focusing on the task and getting the job done. If she was a man, she'd be considered an instrumental leader. As a female, she's considered a bitch, right? That's kind of our perceptions of women in those roles means that they're violating the norm of the expression of gender that we accept from women, right? And the same thing for men. If a man is an expressive leader instead of an instrumental leader, right? If instead of, yelling and barking orders at you, if he's, really trying to get to know you and care about you and is emotional and empathic and is very kind of like mellow and focused more on like, oh, it doesn't matter if we get this done. I just want to make sure everyone has a good experience in this kind of thing. Like they're going to be frowned upon as well. They're going to be viewed negatively through this lens of gender that expects that if a man is emotional or caring or something of that nature, that somehow he's not a man or he's weak or he, doesn't have the same kind of like power necessary to lead. So really, we tend to look at leadership through the prism of gender, and if someone violates the expectation of which role they'll be in, yeah, people don't like that. All right, bureaucracy. So bureaucracy is a type of secondary group designed to perform tasks efficiently. So they tend to, provide many basic necessities to our culture. And Weber identified 6 characteristics of bureaucracies. He said they are specialized, there's technical competence involved, there's a lot of hierarchy, there's many rules and regulations, there's impersonality, and of course, a formal written communication. So if you think about those examples, it's pretty easy to see like the DMV as an example of a bureaucracy, right? It's very specialized, like you have to go up to the specific window that you need to. There's some technical competence in the way that like things are very ordered and structured, like you have a specific date that you're supposed to have your registration in by or things of that nature. There's hierarchy in who you see and how you see them. There's often very strict rules and regulations about like when forms need to be submitted, hence written communication, right? You have to fill out a lot of forms and figures, turn them in by the rules and regulations of what's expected and when. And it's extremely impersonal, right? Because if you make a mistake or forget to turn in a form or do something wrong and it results in you losing your license, it's not like anyone sits you down and goes, oh, no worries, let's figure this out together, right? It's like, no, it's super impersonal. They're like, I don't care about you. I don't care about your problem. You go figure it out yourself. It's your own problem, right? And that's why people feel super alienated by bureaucracies, right? They hate going to the DMV. They hate going to admissions and records. They hate going to like, if they have a really terrible HMO, the doctor's office, because those places can be very efficient. They get a lot of people in and out. They because of the specialization and the technical competence in these things, but the sitting there and having to fill out forms and having to wait and just be treated kind of like a number and not a person makes people feel like crap, right? So most people hate bureaucracies, but they are valuable in the kind of things that they provide us. So nowadays we have kind of like a more extreme version of this bureaucracy, right? George Ritzer says that this bureaucratic rationalization has spread, and it's caused what he calls McDonaldization. So McDonaldization is the increase in efficiency and dehumanization that has happened in the modern work era, right? So Ritzer says that many institutions in our society now operate like a fast food restaurant, and they focus on these 4 factors, right? These are the 4 factors. So hint, I'm gonna like go over it for the study guide review, but also, yeah, the 4 factors are part of the essay question. So anywho, basically the first one is efficiency, right? So that everything should be very quick And like, for example, if you go to a fast food restaurant, typically if you drive through the drive-through, you see like there's a clock often, like that you can see from the drive-through window. That'll tell you how long you've been, like, since you ordered to get your food. That's obviously they're not focusing on the quality of the food necessarily. They're focusing on how fast can they get it to you. So that means that each individual food item is broken down into like 1,000 different steps. So like if you work at McDonald's, then someone orders a specific burger or specific food item, then you know the amount of time it should take to make it, right? Like you're supposed to put the bun in this thing and press this button. Put the fries in the fryer and press that button. Put the this in there and press that button, right? And there's a very specific order to all of these things, right? Which makes it very efficient because it happens quickly. And yeah, it's very, it's based on this idea of like timeliness. Also, the second feature, these features kind of overlap in the way they work, but they are somewhat unique, like calculability. Calculability it's related to efficiency, right? Part of being so efficient is the fact that you can get more and more people in and out of the store. And the more people you can get in and out of the store, the more calculable it is, meaning the more money you're going to make, right? So calculability is really this focus on quantity over quality, right? So like McDonald's, they don't say like 1,000 or 10,000 happy customers, right? It says on the sign, 1 billion burgers served, right? They're not looking for how happy you were with those burgers. They're looking for how many they sold, right? So that's that idea of like the focus on the calculability is like the dollars and cents aspect of it, right? So like each food item being broken down into the specific tasks is really just a way that they can kind of have a monetary figure of these things. So it's really interesting, like with the fast food industries, the majority of the money they make is actually on like the fries and the sodas. It's kind of interesting because the fries cost them very little, right? If you just like need oil, salt, potato, right? It doesn't cost very much, but they can charge you a couple bucks for it. Same thing with soda. They just buy a thing of syrup and you put a bunch of water in it, and therefore you just paid a bunch of money for ice with a little bit of syrup and water, right? They make a ton of money off of that crap. So like getting the meal or whatever, people think, oh, I'm saving money because I'm not buying these individually. It's like, yeah, they cost them 15 cents for the thing they sold you 250 for. But anyway, that's how that works. So it's this calculability is all about the focus on more and more and more money, not necessarily the quality aspect. And then predictability is this idea that no matter, this is the third step, is predictability. No matter which McDonald's you go to, it's supposed to be predictable, meaning the drive-through looks pretty much the same. The food you get tastes the same, right? So like if you order I don't know, like a fish fillet at a place in Fullerton and at a place in South County, it's supposed to taste the same, right? The fries are supposed to taste the same. The predictability is the idea that like you order a thing, not only do you get what you ordered, which is the predictability as well, but it's exactly the same as you expected it to be, right? And then control is really, sometimes they call it human technology or different aspects of it. Basically, control is the idea of taking away the human aspect of the job and giving it over to computers or any aspect of technology that can eliminate the necessity for human jobs, right? Because if you get rid of human jobs, guess what? More calculability, because you don't have to pay as many people, right? So control can be seen in like the McDonald's model by like what I was saying before of how when you break each food item down to a specific tasks, it's not as if when you work at McDonald's that you're a chef or a short order cook where you get the freedom to like cook items the way that you think that they should be cooked. You're given a very specific training and schedulized kind of thing where it's like you put this in this thing and press this button, and you press this thing and this button, and the machine does it. You are just kind of the steward of the machine. So you become almost kind of robotic in the way that you encounter your work life, right? So also the fact that like through drive-throughs instead of through face-to-face personhood, right? You're talking through like this technological kind of device. Also nowadays, there's a lot of food ordering apps which do a lot of this, right? Where You don't even have to, like McDonald's, I'm sure has one. All those places have one, right? Where you can order it on your phone and then just show up and pick up the food. So you don't even have to talk to a person at all during any of the process. You can set up the payment on your phone. So you just kind of like set it up on your thing. It's definitely predictable. You're going to get what you want. It's calculable for the company because they don't have to pay a person to like take your order. So it makes more money for them to have an app because, you know, they're thinking, because people think it's more convenient, they're going to use it more. And then and it's efficient because it's efficient for you for sure too, because you show up and your food's ready when you want it to be, right? So anyway, that's kind of like a spin on how McDonaldization is getting even more exaggerated, I guess, in its scope, um, as we apply more and more technology to this already very ritualized McDonaldization that we experience, right? So, um, you know, that's all I'm really looking for when you talk about the essay stuff. We'll get to that too in the exam review, but really just those 4 different features and what they mean, and then I'm going to ask you guys to make an example of your own, right? Alrighty, the strength of weak ties. Okay, so there's this really interesting idea of like weak ties and strong ties. Like, what is the difference between these weak ties and strong ties, right? So when it comes to job networking, the kind of people you know can determine the kind of jobs or ties that you have, can determine the kind of jobs you get, right? So if you look at, you know, strong ties can be the people that you're close with, like your relatives, your good friends, your mentors, and weak ties are typically just your acquaintances, right? People like you know them, but you don't know them well. So there's different status groups here too in this kind of infographic they have here. So you have the high status, so you know the different levels of where people start affects what kind of ties they have, and what kind of ties they have affect what kind of jobs they have and where they end up trajectory wise, right? So if you look at the low status group in the infographic and consider the distribution of their strong ties, why are these strong ties not likely to be very useful in helping them find desirable jobs? Well, because you can see down here, because remember, the weak ties are the little dot, dot, dot. The strong ties are the dark red ones. So a lot of people in the low status or blue collar, semi-professional jobs have these strong ties, right? But the problem is it has everything to do with who you know. So if you're more likely to get your first jobs from a family friend or someone that you know or something of that nature, and you're poor, guess what? The people you know are poor, so they have access to poor jobs or jobs that don't pay well, right? So like this like it says down here, for those of a lower status, weak ties of a similar status are not especially useful and far-reaching. Like you see this situation here, like, oh, this person has a acquaintance relationship. That's not going to get them very far, right? But then the strong ties down here, it means that sure, these people care, like that's your friend, that's your aunt, that's your uncle, that's your whoever that got you the job. But if they're broke, they're not really going to help you get past your own social class level. Versus if you have strong ties and you're already in a wealthy position, that would help you as well through this kind of nepotistic, like, oh, my uncle runs that company, I can get a job in that company, right? But if your uncle owns nothing, then he probably can't refer you to a very good job, right? And also in the infographic, you can see there's strong ties that jump 2 or more levels and weak ties that jump 2 or more levels. So you see how, you know, someone that goes from here can jump all the way to here, right? And you see these kind of ties as well, right? Someone that's just in this space can basically get, you know, all the way referring weak ties up to here. The reason for a lot of that is what they call these bridges, right? These people that can often connect people together that might be outside of their circle of influence. So, for example, let's say you're poor, you're working at some job or whatever, and this person refers you to an office job, right? Then the office job is going to have mixed connections because typically in an office environment, you're going to have like some people that are like the office staff that they still have to dress nice, but they don't get paid anything. And then you have people that work within that same office world that are wealthier, that are making somewhat near six figures, or maybe like in management positions or making a decent amount of money. So because of that, you're kind of straddling two different social classes within one work environment. So that means if you do really well in that environment and make good associations with people that maybe are your bosses or the executives or people that are higher up in that chain, they can theoretically refer you to jobs that could take you up to a high status job of your own, right? So basically the way this works is like you should care about the fact that who you know affects what kind of jobs you get, right? But also um, in what setting you work, as well as where you started out to begin with, is going to have a lot to do with what kind of jobs you have access to. So it's interesting that sometimes the acquaintance ones can be the most important, right? Those weak ties can be, someone that you went to class with, someone that you knew that you worked with at an old job, that you talked to at work a bit, but you never hung out outside of it. Like sometimes those people can be the people that refer you to the best jobs. So it's important to kind of network and keep those things in mind to have resources for your own future.